Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Streamlining Resource Optimization and Utilization. Appreciate you sparing 30 minutes with us this morning or afternoon, wherever you're based. Got people all over the world joining us. That's great to see. Appreciate so many people participating in these webinars. We do a lot of different types, whether it's thought leadership. This is more angled at an overview of CMap and the product demo. Most of the time I'll actually be in our solution, walking through some different resourcing, utilization, pricing type scenarios with you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Edwards. I'm the head of partnerships here at CMap, and I'm going to be running the bulk of today's session.
Hi, I'm Tom Rains. I'm the product marketing manager here at CMap. And my role really on this webinar is to help assist with the Q&A. So of course, there's a Q&A section available. So if you have any questions about anything that you're seeing or anything that you need more clarification on, feel free to drop a question in there and I'll endeavour to get them all answered whilst we're working through the webinar.
Perfect. So we've got 30 minutes. This is being recorded. You'll automatically get an open access link to share with your colleagues or watch again in the next 24 hours. So feel free to do that too. As Tom highlighted, we've got a Q&A at the end. So use the Q&A part of the Zoom panel to get those in. Those guys go direct to him and him only, and he will be responding to those. I'm going to be sharing a high-level overview about why CMap is used by hundreds of professional services firms, and then dive into the live demo component. So add some context as to how we can help you master resourcing, utilization, and overall running your firm. This is a little bit about us, for those of you who don't know. CMap provides an end-to-end operations platform. It's purpose-built for consulting firms. We have over 500 clients, 25,000 users, and are trusted by leading consulting firms across the world and across a range of consulting disciplines and end markets. And what we find is that in any consulting firm, professional services organization too, there are 5 core operating processes essential to your firm's success: pipeline management, resource management, time and expense management, project financial management, and performance management. And our solution happily spans the range of those 5 processes. And it helps you answer really important questions like, how much pipeline coverage do we have? What's our staff utilization? How much cost have we incurred to date on this project? How does that compare versus budget? How profitable is this project or client or portfolio of work and overall firm? And what does our revenue forecast look like across both live and pipeline projects? And how do we achieve all of that? It's an end-to-end operations platform with functionality that spans the likes of job costing, resource management, skills tracking, core functionality like timesheets and expenses, your margin tracking, looking at WIP and billing, revenue recognition, invoicing, forecasting, reporting, everything you need to successfully run your professional services firm, as well as best of breed third-party application integrations with the likes of the Microsoft Suite, HubSpot, Salesforce, QuickBooks, Xero, Sage, and others. And all of that functionality is brought to life with a really easy to use, engaging interface, accessible on any device, drives adoption and helps you deliver your desired business outcomes. And we're really proud to say that this philosophy around adoption has been backed up by our clients, who consistently and independently vote as #1 for ease of use and ease of setup in G2 reports in the project-based ERP category. That's a background to us as a business, knowing you'd be in safe hands. But let's have a little bit more of a look at how CMap can help you with resource optimization and utilization. CMap spans a really broad range of functionality, but the purpose of today is to focus in and hone in on how CMap can help you master the art of resource optimization and utilization. Now, first off, why is this important? Well, in any consulting firm, people are your biggest asset, cost and source of revenue. And that is, by the same token, how your people are typically going to be the vast majority of your cost base as well. And then managing that ebb and flow between staffing capacity and then your staffing demand is arguably the biggest single key process that a consulting firm has to master, get right. Because with a well-utilized team and that nice consistent balance of capacity and demand, That's the number one characteristic that we see in operationally successful and profitable consulting firms. So what's on the agenda for the live demo that I'll be going through any second now? 4 things and then a bonus too. So we're going to be allocating the right person to the right project based on availability and skills, looking at how to factor not just live projects, but also pipeline projects into your resource planning, both short, medium term, and then forecasting utilization across different people and roles. Then all of how that comes together in a visual summary of staffing capacity versus demand, which enables you to plan more strategic-based hiring with confidence. And like I touched on, there's also a little bonus, which is to show you how to build a budget in our fee estimator, or a proposal indeed, from a piece of work from role-based resourcing. And like with everything today, those often siloed tasks may be done in disconnected spreadsheets, but by connecting them up, it enables you to have a single source of truth and that future-focused perspective. Okay, into the CMap demo. So in front of you, this is CMap, and I've created an account for a fictitious consulting firm with people based in North America and the UK. And my whole team runs everything from bid to billing here. And you'll see the types of areas of CMap across the top. But where we're going to start is actually going to be in our reporting. And we've got a number of standard reports that enable consultancies and professional services firms to get up and running out of the box. The first for today's session that we're going to have a look at is going to be staff availability. So I'm going to do this just for my UK team to begin with, and this will help me allocate the right person to the right project based on availability and skills. You can imagine this fictitious firm, potentially this was previously done on spreadsheets or point solutions, but because it's in CMap, I've actually combined my live and potential pipeline opportunities. I've got various filters that I could apply if I wanted to narrow down, and I will do that later actually. And it's enabling you to have all of that data in one place. So instantly, you get this report at the click of a button, but a bit of orientation first. What you're seeing here is a view of the hours available, first by that geolocation filter I applied when running the report. So this is my UK team. Then it's by job role, partner, senior consultant, and then data analyst at the bottom. And I've got a view week on week. And in this example, everybody within the organization has a 40-hour working week capacity. I've also got the ability to switch this to a daily view or have a look at my availability based on percentage rather than hours during the week, time-based. So it's color-coded, and the gray means no or very limited available time for my people. Red indicates there are over allocations. Yellow is partial availability, and green is near full availability. So imagine we're in our weekly operations meeting with key stakeholders from sales and delivery, maybe partner in there too, and we can instantly start assessing our current and future availability with this very visual report. Now, there are a couple of specific scenarios at play here that I wanted to highlight. First off, let's take these partners at the top. It's looking pretty optimal for 4-5 weeks, aside from Anne being slightly over allocated here, the week commencing 16th of October. A little further out, we can see that John, he's got availability week commencing the 23rd of October and then week commencing the 13th of November too. In between that, both Anne and Ben are massively over allocated that week commencing the 6th of November. So let's take a look at the engagement that Anne is scheduled to. That 8-hour over allocation is actually coming from a day's holiday. And that's down as what we call an internal code. Those internal codes can be line items specific to your firm. And it's where people potentially can allocate things non-billable time or things like this, holiday or attending conferences, networking, external training, IP creation, whatever internal codes you want to then have reports on, you can do. So the decision here potentially might be to see if Anne can absorb that over-allocated work into the remainder of the project. That's a discussion to have. The bigger challenge is these 32 hours, which again is down to holiday. And the good news is she has got 18 hours of availability the week after. So again, initial thought might be speaking to the client of project 1009 and seeing if an extension to the delivery would be acceptable. She could push that across. Then you might actually have a look at moving project 1026, which looks to be a week-long workshop. And that could go to John because you can see below, he has got the availability to be able to take on that work in that same week. If we click on Ben, we also can start looking at his over allocation. And that's because he's on two major projects during that piece of time. But again, if we look at John's availability in the weeks leading up to that, he actually has enough hours to potentially take on a piece of work that Ben has. Now, if you wanted to actually start moving the projects around, CMap has an area called the workload schedule. We can have a view across your whole business. Again, lots of different filters and criteria that you can run. Enables you to essentially get this perspective across the team, showing where, again, very visually, where you'll have pinch points. And you'll see there, Anne has got that over allocation. You see where Ben has got the over allocation. Further down into different departments, you can see Sunil here has got an over allocation. If we wanted to move an engagement to somebody who had greater capacity, you absolutely could, and you can do that there. Now let's take a look actually at another type of scenario. So if I run the report again for my UK team, we've already taken a look at what is happening with the partners. Let's have a look at what's happening in the senior consultants and the consultants part of our business. The first thing that strikes me is for a period of time, there is limited availability, which is going to be pretty good. And then you've got this smattering of partial availability, over allocation, and then lots of availability for some people, which is a fairly classic challenge that consultants have where their favorite people get overloaded and then others end up on the bench. And visually, you get that instant view about who that is, and you can make changes to that. The second thing I notice here at the bottom of the consultant column is what we call placeholder. And this is massive. This has very, very limited availability. Now, the placeholder is provisional resource allocation, where you weren't exactly sure when you were creating the opportunity who you were going to have, a named individual on that project, but you knew you needed somebody with a specific skill set, or in this case, a role. And of course, at some point, particularly in the short term, you need to start moving that placeholder allocated resource onto named individuals. The challenge in this fictitious firm is for a sustained period of time, we've actually got a lot of demand, but not enough availability to be able to cater for it. So what you could potentially be doing in this scenario is thinking, is there an associate pool or contractor pool that we can be dipping into to meet that short-term demand? In this scenario as well, because some of the senior consultants have got a lot more availability than the mid-weight consultants, do you actually start moving some of that work to them? Now, the client would be very happy getting more experienced person on the role, but is it too late in the day to push a price increase to reflect that change to them? Or do you just have to accept that the margin will be tighter and lower? Lots of considerations at play here, but you have the data at your fingertips. You can run a report in seconds, which enables you to then take that away, talk with the relevant stakeholders, and make an educated decision. The final scenario for staff availability that often comes about, let's say someone in sales comes to you, they've got a 2-month engagement with a brand new hot prospect they'd love to work with. That client saying they can sign off really quickly and potentially you can start to deliver that work inside 4 or 5 weeks. Sounds great, but can you realistically go to the client and say, yes, we have got people to do that? So you want to see who and who isn't available in the firm. And that sales opportunity might require somebody with a specific level of experience, a skill set to deliver, or in a specific location. All of that you can track against individuals within CMap and then filter against, like we're going to do here. So I've already know that the opportunity is going to be requiring someone from the UK. I know that it's going to require somebody who is a consultant level, and let's say it's maybe a digital consultancy, and the skill set that we require is somebody who's got critical path expertise. Let's run that report. It shows me who in the business could potentially meet that piece of demand. Well, in the short term, there's 4 weeks where the client's looking to sign off, nobody. But the good news is, if we look here, William McCall, he comes off a project and has got availability for 8 weeks starting at the end of October. So all of a sudden, puts you in a great place to be able to say to that potential client, we have somebody available who can do that. The next report that I wanted to show you is staff utilization. It's another standard report and it enables you to forecast utilization across different people and roles. It's combining my live engagements and my pipeline opportunities again. And this helps you answer the question, do I need to hire? Yes or no? And it helps you predict how busy people will be. Again, we've got highly visual, color-coded indicators of future utilization. Excuse me a second there. Split down by role and individual. What we are seeing here, if you look across the firm, you can see where potentially people are going to be overutilized. Like in these cases here, the reds surround the white box, the over 100% number in there, and potentially going to be risk at burnout, particularly if it's for longer periods of time, or those who are underutilized and then you've got expensive resource on the bench. You can also use this to compare your peer group to see how their utilization rates will look, or against internal KPIs, or you can actually just see if they're sitting perfectly at where they need to be, in which case you're onto a good thing. Now, if we scroll down to have a look at the other roles within this firm, we can take a look at the data analyst team. Now, this is where big strategic hiring level decisions can really be made off this type of report. Because at the bottom here, you'll see a bar that says available overspill. And in this scenario, that single line powerfully shows that this team, the data analyst team, have a negative available overspill for a prolonged period of time. So if we look at them individually, we can see that either broadly working to their absolute maximum at 100%, and in quite a lot of cases for a lot of weeks, actually over and above. And we can even see on a placeholder allocation, there's demand that's left unresourced. We can have a deeper dive into which of those projects need to have resource allocated against as well. And it gives you a view based on the percentage week on week of the full-time equivalent spend that needed to be spent on each engagement. All of this comes together really nicely in an additional report called the Staffing Prediction Report, which is a visual summary of overall capacity versus demand, which is where most firms want to see it, that consistent and sustained balance between the two to enable you to plan bigger hiring decisions with more confidence. Let's, in this instance, switch it up. We're going to have a look at our US office. And we're going to first have a look at the live engagements to see whether we need to hire. Excuse me a second. First up, this is what most systems have, which is a view of demand over the coming months. So you see September through to August. And the blue dotted line is your weighted capacity of full-time equivalents, adjusted for when people have booked annual leave or on maternity, maybe they've got other non-billable time recorded against them. And the dark green is your live in-flight engagements, so the contracted work that you're having to deliver. Well, based on this view, you can see there's actually a shortfall in it for the first couple of months in the short term, followed by a big peak and then a smaller peak and then a gradual tailing off. And that last part is fairly common. I'm sure lots of firms dialing into this will see something fairly similar. But what CMap also enables you to do is combine your pipeline. And by doing that, it paints a very different picture. Maybe even a more meaningful report, because you get this additional light green, which is all of the opportunities from your pipeline. And all of a sudden, we can start seeing that if you close out the opportunities at the rate in which you typically do in the short term, you'll be getting those people off the bench, and actually you're going to be having more demand than you've got resource supply for. And then in the midterm, those two peaks are really well bolstered by more of a sustained pipeline. If you build a cadence of running this report every couple of weeks, you'll actually start to spot changes to those trend lines. And that is perfect if you're trying to figure out when to start a hiring process. In the table below this, you get a more granular view, which is month on month. And then in this example, I split it down by geographic location first, i.e. the US office, and then by role again. So then I can start seeing that balance between available capacity and demand. And when it turns to red, it indicates to me where these pinch points will be and which roles are going to be required to potentially up your resource for. If you're a larger firm or you want to assess your staffing prediction by department or skill, you can use additional filters to be able to do that, as you could with those other reports I showed you earlier. And a really common use case is where you actually adjust it for the pipeline stage. So the probability of those pipeline stages to close. So for instance, you might run this report a couple of times. The first time you might want to have a look at a longer term, which includes everything with a 10% likelihood to close and above. And then you might run it for more partially likely to close, and then a shorter term view where everything that's 90% likely to close and above, when you're maybe looking to make decisions in the weeks and rather than months or years. And the most successful firms that we find use these three reports on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, get into that cadence, have that reporting structure in place, involving different stakeholders so that whatever decisions need to be made, they have the data in one place to accurately reflect rather than just going off that gut instinct. Another part of CMap that I wanted to show you was building a budget from resource. And it's potentially for a piece of work where you're trying to create a fee or a budget based on roles rather than necessarily a fixed fee to begin with. This also will demonstrate how all of the CMapping data is linked and how intelligently and efficiently CMap can support how resourcing feeds operations and financial decisions too. So let's dive into a potential project. 1027, excuse me. And this is going to be an interesting piece of work. We've got the spec on it, and we're now going to figure out who that we want to be allocated to it. Well, in this first instance, we don't actually know the named individuals. So we're going to be going with a couple of placeholders. We know that we need a partner. So we've already input the partner placeholder, and we need a senior consultant. You could add a named individual if you wanted, and you've got the availability here. Or in this instance, I'm just going to add the placeholder again. And then what I'm going to start doing is adding time to this potential piece of work in the form of hours in the resource schedule. I'm then going to build my budget from that resource allocation. And if I go into our area of CMap called the fee estimator, you will see a budget that has been created from that resource allocation. Now, alongside being able to build budgets from resource, you can build budgets from preset templates. If you do consistent types of work, you can save it and then reload it. You can add different stages, different tasks. But in this instance, we've just gone with this resource-based costing. You'll also see the opportunity if I wanted to add an additional, maybe travel and expenses, or make an adjustment, let's say a discount or a rounding, I can make that adjustment within here. I've got all of my rate cards for my different clients inbuilt and the ability to save as a snapshot if I want to refer back to at a later date. What I would potentially do at this point as well is just to check my projected margin on that engagement. I might have an internal KPI that each piece of work needs to have a minimum gross margin of 50%. Well, we know even before we send out the proposal, this is at 69. If a client comes back and actually says they do need to adjust it, you can make an adjustment to the rates within this part of CMap 2, and then you can export into a proposal template. All of this is live and instantaneous. So I've created that opportunity. I've allocated some placeholder resource against it. And if I go back into one of our reports, let's say staff utilization, you will see I've now got 3 weeks of 100% placeholder demand at the partner, and then the 200 because I did 80 hours per week for the senior consultant. So that's all happened in real time. So your business can continue in the background and run these reports to get live and intelligent information. That actually brings us to an end of the CMap resourcing demo. But as I touched on at the start of the call, resourcing is just one component of CMap's functionality and the operational financial processes that we span. Tom, over to you. Is there any questions in the chat that haven't been able to be answered that we can answer now?
There's one that's come in. So there was one that was asking what's the source for the data that you see in the staff availability and staff utilization reports. I've answered it, but just for the benefit of anyone that's watching a recording, perhaps. The data is coming from the resource schedule. So anything that you enter in the resource schedule is feeding that report. So if someone is resourced to something, that will reduce their availability and increase their utilization. That's how that works. What was the one I've just answered one? There's someone that was asking, so I can see how this is very useful for your own staff, for employed staff, but we use a significant proportion of associates and contractors. So do you have any suggestions on how you could factor those in? So really, there's a couple of ways that you could approach doing that. So option one is that you give them a license, you enable them to log into CMap and come into the time off area of CMap where they can basically say between this date period, I'm going to be unavailable and working elsewhere. And it's really simple. You just create a new sort of time off category that's just called like associate unavailable. You can call it whatever you want. And all the individual needs to do is say between this start date, this end date, I'm busy. So that will then factor into all of the relevant reporting in CMap, like showing them as being unavailable and all that sort of stuff. The second option is that rather than getting them to do it themselves, someone internally can do it on their behalf because it's possible to create security permissions that enable an individual to spoof the time off area for others. So there could be someone that's like the resourcing manager or operations manager, whoever it might be. You give them permission to go into the time off section for the associates where they can update those that the unavailability in there. But that's typically speaking how people would do it. There's a few more that have come in, which I've not had a chance to answer, so we'll just work through them.
Just quickly, for those people who got to jump in a couple of minutes, if you wanted to book a demo with any of our team to delve into it in more specifics, maybe bring up some examples that are relevant for your organization, in the chat, there is our URL where you can book a demo, and that is www.cmap.io/book-a-demo. So feel free to use that if you wanted a deeper dive with somebody into the solution, how it works for you. Tom, sorry, back to you.
Cool, no pops. So what is the typical work week for the industry? Is this just something that you've got for demo purposes? The answer is yes, it's just for demo. We will configure it to match whatever you need. So, for example, you're seeing hours there. If you think in terms of days, and that's your default kind of way of thinking about things, you can have it so that you resource like 5 days a week rather than 40 hours a week. Let's just say, for example, you did think in hours. Well, if you have a 37.5-hour week, for example, we'll set it up so it works like that. So that's, as you say, it's just purely for the demo there. There's one here relating to someone wanting to see the projected margin tab that doesn't have it. So that's just a configuration thing. So we'll arrange for someone in support to enable that for you. It's not linked to any particular plan. It's an on-off thing. For the staffing prediction tool, how does this link with stage dates? Well, it intrinsically links with them. So in CMap, within a project, with the way that your project is structured, you can have what's called stages. So lots of projects will typically potentially only have one stage. It'll just be like a 3-month consulting engagement, for example. It's just a single stage. In which case, really, the start and the end dates with just the project start and end date. If you've got a more detailed program, though, where it's got multiple phases and it's going on for a longer period of time, requiring different sorts of individuals at different times and all that sort of stuff, then what you can do is say that for each of these phases, it's predicted to start and end at this particular point in time. If you get to that level of detail, that will then flow through to the staffing prediction report, because it will then have more data available to it, so to speak, in order to then report that correctly. So rather than it just being some kind of like flat, even spread across the project, if you do break your project down into multiple stages and you then take the time to say predicted start and end dates for those stages, again, it will become more accurate like that. Hopefully that's answered that. Can the staff availability report be condensed into business unit or geographical summaries? The answer to that is yes. That's just through the use of fields and filtering in CMap. So we'll set it up so that you can filter by entities, business units. You can create fields for geographical reasons, whatever it might be. So that's just handled through fields and filtering. So that's fine. Cool, is it? I'm just having to read this. So what is the best way to manage working from abroad? Staff are still available to work, but not on all projects. How do people manage that? Interesting. So well, I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head here. So one possible scenario might be that you create a custom field against a user called abroad, yes or no. So that if somebody is still working, but they're not within the country and therefore they couldn't obviously go and visit a client at their site, you would be able to get them to go into there and adjust that field. Because when you create a custom field for users, for example, you can say whether you want the actual individual to be able to see that in their profile and whether you would want them to be able to update it. So that could become something you handle as a process, which is, yeah, you're not out of the office, but you're not in the UK, for example, so you can't be deployed in the UK. Just go into your profile and mark yourself as being abroad. And therefore, we would then be able to factor that data into our resourcing decisions. So if we're looking for someone, let's just exclude people there. We know at this moment in time we're abroad. Hopefully that's answered your question there. Is there a report that combines previous utilization and predicted utilization? Not standard. However, that should be possible via something called the report builder, which we didn't really get into today. CMap stores like previous planned data and things like that. So that should be something that's possible, but via custom reporting rather than standard reports. And I believe that's all of them. There might be another one that drops in. Someone's frantically typing as we speak, but that should be all of them answered now.
Tom, did you see the question which was for staff for the staffing prediction tool? How does this link with stage gates? Apologies if you did.
Well, if you'd been listening by now, you would have heard that I've answered that one. So and you always zone out when I'm speaking.
No, not at all. I appreciate everybody's actually stayed at least 5 minutes beyond our cutoff. What I will say is thanks for your um, attention, participation, engagement. Really pleased to see lots of questions and amazed so many of people have stayed beyond time. That's really great to see and appreciated. If there's anything else, me and Tom can stay on for a couple more minutes, answer any more questions. Feel free to fire them our way. If not, we can wish you all a great rest of your day or afternoon, wherever you're based. Feel free to connect with Tom, me on LinkedIn. Look for that book a demo link in the chat too. I think though, yes, if somebody's asking if we have a customized demo, can we explore the other parts of the system? Absolutely. This is just, one part of CMap, and depending on what your challenges or opportunities are in your business, we can tailor that demo to meet your specific requirements as well.
Did you mention book a demo, Ben?
Unbelievable. Okay, I think with that, we'll say goodbye to everybody. Appreciate it. And if any other questions come in that we've missed, we can check it out afterwards and respond to you for those who've asked. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.